In most cases, if a horror movie scares its viewers, they can at least take solace in the fact that it's a work of fiction that isn't actually real. Unfortunately, there are quite a few horror movies that were inspired by things that actually happened, which means that even after you've seen and potentially enjoyed them, it's hard to escape the fact that what you watched came from a real place. So that's what we're going to be having a look at today. So here are 5 horror movies that were inspired by real life events. Number 1. The Town That Dreaded Sundown. The Town That Dreaded Sundown was a movie released in 1976 that centers around a killer who terrorized a small Texas city known as Texarkana. During the movie, we see the masked man attack and kill numerous people in the town. This movie might seem like it's a simple slasher film, but it's actually based on a real story. The story took place in the same town in 1946, where in the space of 10 weeks, a masked man attacked 8 people, killing 5 in the process. The city was in a state of panic for the entire summer, and police tried to track him down, but they never did. Because of this, the killer was given the nickname the Phantom Killer. 30 years later, this movie was released, and was shot and even premiered in the same city. The movie claimed that everything in the film was completely true, and that only the names had been changed. This wasn't entirely true, as a lot of the plot was fabricated. The fabricated parts of the movie became a part of the legend that is the Phantom Killer, and for decades, the lore surrounding him was changed. It is creepy to watch this movie knowing that this man did exist, and that he did inflict a lot of pain on this city. But it's important to take this movie with a grain of salt, because the film may be entertaining, but it's not entirely accurate.
Jenkins, age 19. Brutally attacked March 3, 1946. Howard W. Turner, 29. Emmylou Cook, 17. Bodies discovered in a wooded area on March 24th. Roy Allen, 17. Peggy Loomis, 15. Both found dead April 14th in Spring Lake Park. Floyd Reed, age 34. Murdered in his home on May 3rd. Mrs. Reed shot twice, but survived. This man's identity is unknown. He was believed to be between 30 and 40 years old. He wore a white hood and was known only as the Phantom Killer.
Number 2. Open Water. Open Water was a survival horror movie released in 2003 that centers around a couple on vacation who go scuba diving in the Caribbean. They get separated from the group and wait for the boat to return so that it can pick them up. They realize that the boat isn't returning and that they are now trapped miles from shore in shark-infested waters. The reason the boat didn't return is because of an inaccurate headcount. This is actually based on a true story that happened 5 years prior to the movie's release, where a married couple, Tom and Eileen Lonergan, were mistakenly left stranded in the Coral Sea on the 25th of January 1998. It was only discovered that they were missing 2 days later, and a huge 3-day search commenced, but they were never found. It's assumed that they either drowned or were eaten by sharks. This also happened because of an inaccurate headcount, and the movie resembles this story quite a bit. The names and locations may have been changed, but the circumstances were very similar. Number 3. Borderland. Borderland is a movie created in 2007 that centers around 3 recent college graduates from Texas who decide to go to Mexico because of the lack of law enforcement in the country. This trip quickly takes a dark turn when one of their friends is abducted by some mysterious men. They later find out that their friend has been kidnapped and that the captors intend to sacrifice him as a part of an African voodoo ritual. This story is obviously quite bizarre, but it is in fact inspired by a real-life event. In 1989, a Texas student named Mark Kilroy, who was celebrating spring break in Mexico, was kidnapped by a cult known as the Narco-Satanists. He was then sacrificed by this cult because their leader, Adolfo Constanzo, told them that by sacrificing other humans, they will become immune to law enforcement catching them. This case gained worldwide media attention, and it was because of this that the cult was discovered and their crimes were exposed. It turns out that they had done this multiple times, as they found 14 other bodies when they found Mark's. The conditions of these bodies and the general circumstances surrounding the case proved that the Narco-Satanists were one of the most dangerous cults in recent years.
My friends and I can give you a ride.
You know, I'm gonna walk anyway.
Hello?
Where am I?
other side of the rainbow.
If Santillán took your friend, there is nothing you can do.
In return for the gods' protection, he gives to them sacrifice. I know where his friend is.
Los espíritus. Papa's gonna use you to talk to him. What's gonna happen to me?
Number 4. The Girl Next Door. The Girl Next Door is a 2007 horror film that tells the story of Meg and her sister Susan. After their parents died in a car crash, they are sent to live with their Aunt Ruth, who instantly dislikes the pair and starts to abuse them on a daily basis. The movie shows us this abuse in a very close-up and personal manner, and it makes for a very disturbing watch. It is an uncomfortable film to sit through because of the torture that the pair go through, and it's hard to believe that this film is based on a real story, but unfortunately it is. It is inspired by the real case of Sylvia Likens, who in 1965 was under the care of Gertrude Baniszewski. Baniszewski treated Sylvia terribly, starving, torturing, and abusing her on a daily basis until she eventually died at the age of 16 from a brain hemorrhage. The specific details of the case aren't worth going into, but they were so bad that the prosecutor in Baniszewski's trial described it as the most terrible crime ever committed in the state of Indiana. Knowing this information, it makes the movie a lot harder to watch, and although it's only loosely based on this case, it still gives viewers a rough idea of the torture that Sylvia Likens had to endure. Number 5. Veronica. Veronica is a Spanish supernatural horror film that was released in 2017. The movie is set in 1991 and tells the story of a 15-year-old girl named Veronica. When she learns that certain cultures used to stage human sacrifices during eclipses in order to contact the dead, Veronica and her friends decide to use a Ouija board during an eclipse. Veronica wants to speak to her recently deceased father, but during the seance, she seemingly gets possessed and passes out. The movie is about the strange things that begin happening to her after this, and surprisingly, it is based around a true story that happened around the same time. The story goes that a Spanish teenager known as Estefania Lazaro had a friend who wanted to contact her recently deceased boyfriend who died in a motorcycling accident. So just like the movie, she decides to use a Ouija board at school with a group of friends, and after this, strange things started to happen to her. The group has said that smoke was coming out of Estefania during the ritual, and over the next 6 months, Estefania started to suffer from seizures on a consistent basis and would often say that she could see shadowy figures that weren't there. She became frantic, paranoid, and often deranged, but no physical harm was dealt to her, and nobody could explain what was wrong with her. 6 months after using the board, she was found dead in her room with absolutely no explanation as to how she died. It was a bizarre case that still doesn't have an answer, and this movie delves into a similar story that is also quite mysterious.
Necesito que te tranquilices y me describas lo que estás viendo. ¡Está aquí! ¿Sigues ahí? ¿Hola?
En las culturas primitivas se creía que lo que ocurría en el cielo era un reflejo de lo que ocurría en la tierra. Por eso se creía también que durante los eclipses la oscuridad reinaba por encima de la luz.
Cerrar los ojos. ¿Hay alguien aquí con nosotras? ¿Quieres hablar con alguna de nosotras? ¿Lo has movido tú?
And that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I try to post a similar creepy video like this every single week, so if you want to subscribe for that, you can.